It's Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer. From Altair to IBM, A History of the PC Revolution. By Stan Veit, Editor-in-Chief Emeritus, Computer Shopper. Copyright 1993 and 2025 by Stan Veit and A-Books Creativity Incorporated. Read by Randy Kindig and David Greelish. Chapter 11. TRS-80, almost everyone's computer. In the spring of 1977, I received a phone call from Ben Rosen, who at that time was a market analyst for Morgan Stanley. He was just about the only stock market analyst specializing in the infant personal computer industry and one of the industry experts. Ben, who later became the chairman of both Compaq and Lotus, had already organized the first of his famous industry seminars, and he had invited me on a panel as a retailer. This call, however, was to tell me that I was about to receive a visit from an important person, if I had time to see and talk with him today. Ben went on to tell me that my visitor would be Charles Tandy, who owned the Radio Shack chain of some 7,000 stores. He had only that day, and he wanted to visit a successful computer store.
Mr. Tandy arrived shortly after lunch and introduced himself. "Call me Charles," he said, as I conducted him through my operation. We started in the basement where we repaired computers, built many of them into systems, and had our stock room. Then to the selling floor, where he seemed most interested in the Apple II and the Sol. Charles was a man who could put everyone at ease, even if they knew how important a person he was. He had the knack of asking the most direct and revealing questions in a way that aroused no resentment. I really enjoyed talking with him, flattered that this powerful businessman would seek me out for advice. At the end of the day, he told me he had visited other computer stores and, in general, classified them into two categories. First, stores run by computer hobbyists, where a neophyte would be ignored or snowed. The second type of store was run by ex-used car salesmen who were masters of the hard sell. They tried to completely snow the average prospective buyer. He said my store did not fit into either category, for which I was grateful, but seemed to meet the customer at whatever level they were at. I told Charles that most of my salespeople were recruited from the hobbyist ranks, but that I had trained them somewhat in the art of retail selling.
We talked all afternoon, and at the end of the day, he asked what I was doing that weekend and would I consider going back with him to his headquarters in Fort Worth. It was common gossip in the industry that Radio Shack was going to be selling computers very soon, but nobody knew what kind they would be selling. Now it seemed that I was being invited to get an advanced look. Of course, I told Charles I would love to go with him. The next morning was Friday, and I met the Tandy party in their suite at the Hotel Carlisle on Park Avenue for breakfast. After breakfast, we piled into a limo for a trip to the airport. But first, we made a stop at a nearby shop where they sold novelty telephones. Charles bought a few as gifts for his friends back in Texas. Later, I was told that he bought the store because they carried the most unusual phones. Phones packed aboard, we drove out to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey and boarded the Tandy corporate jet for the flight to Fort Worth.
All this was new and exciting to me. I had never flown in a corporate jet, and I had never been to Texas. Landing in Fort Worth, we drove to a local barbecue, which was Charles' favorite, and then straight to the Tandy plant. There, Charles introduced me to most of his executives and told me they were developing a new type of computer for sale in their stores. He said that they had investigated all of the machines being offered for sale and had come to the conclusion that they were all too complicated and too expensive for the average person. They had therefore designed a completely new concept in small computers. At this point, there is a photo of a Tandy Model I with the monitor and the cassette recorder. Underneath it, it says Radio Shack's complete TRS-80 microcomputer system, consisting of a 53-key keyboard and microcomputer plus regulated power supply, computer-controlled data cassette recorder, and 12-inch video monitor. It was, the company advertised, suitable for business, educational, and home applications. It was available exclusively from Radio Shack stores and dealers nationwide from $599.95. I continued with the book text. With that, they showed me what seemed to be a keyboard and a 12-inch TV screen with a wire connecting the two units. The plastic case was colored with a metallic silver gray finish, and the keyboard and front of the TV was a contrasting black. The oversized logo on the front read Radio Shack TRS-80 and Microcomputer System.
First comment was, "Where's the computer?" "It's inside the keyboard case," I was told. Right under the keyboard? I could hardly believe it. I was used to the Altair and MSI, even the SWTPC 6800 and the SAW with their brute force power supplies and expandable bus. Even the Apple II, which I considered a masterpiece of compact design, took much more space than the TRS-80 keyboard unit. Then I noticed the external power supply plugged into the wall. Well, there was one reason for the size. We decided to use an external power supply to conserve space and keep the heat out of the computer case. Okay, I thought, that made sense.
I really liked the idea that the TRS-80 came with its own TV monitor. In those days, video monitors were very hard to get, and they were expensive. I had bought a huge order of 9-inch, high-quality, security-type video monitors to sell with my computers, and I sold them at a very small markup if the customer bought a computer. Radio Shack had provided a 12-inch TV-quality video display that was really a television with the radio section removed. This was a smart way to get a larger, reasonably priced video monitor if you had the buying power of Tandy. Tell me some more about the computer, I asked.
Well, someone answered, it's a Z80-based machine with 4K of RAM and a ROM with the boot up software and BASIC. Programs and data are loaded through a cassette. The video display has 64 characters and 16 lines, and there are graphics characters as well as uppercase letters. This is interesting, I thought, just like the first Apple I. Tell me about the BASIC, I asked. Well, it's out, level 1 contained in a ROM. This is an integer-only version with only 2 character variables. Our level 2 will be out shortly and will have enough advanced features for anybody.
By now, I was very impressed with the TRS-80, and I fully realized that it was going to be hard competition for anything I sold, except possibly the Apple II. The big question in my mind was, how much would they sell it for? As if he was reading my mind, Charles asked me, how much do you think I should sell it for? I really had no basis of comparison except possibly the SAW. I had not received an Apple II yet, and it sold for $1,400 with a video monitor. Well, this machine is a lot simpler, so I should figure about $1,000. However, this is Radio Shack, so it must be cheaper. I'll say $900. Well, I said, about $900 would be a fair price. What would you think about $600? One of the Tandy people answered.
If you were going to sell this system with a video display and built-in BASIC for $600, you better build a hell of a lot of them, I returned. Stan, just how many do you think would be enough? One of the Tandy people asked. Enough, I said, would be about 50,000. You are out of your mind, answered one of Tandy's staff. No one has ever built more than 5,000 of the same type of computer, and we are thinking 12,000. You have 7,000 stores, I returned. If you have only one to show and one to sell, that's no way for a big company to do business.
We don't think all of our stores can sell computers. It's a specialized business. True, I answered, but this computer may change all that. After this exchange, I sensed a division in the company. Charles and all the people he had brought on board to develop the TRS-80 were convinced that the TRS-80 would be a tremendous success and would change their business. The older electronics people, whose thinking was fixed in the audio radio, and hobby electronics business did not understand the fascination of the computer for even the most conservative business person.
Charles then showed me folders containing cassettes and manuals for all kinds of home and business software. There were accounting programs, home management programs, and educational programs, all to be sold for less than $30. At this, I smiled and said, keeping business records on a tape cassette program has not proved very practical. I was being very kind. You'd be well advised to keep your programs very simple until you get a disk-based system. They ignored me and changed the subject. How many of these computers could you sell in your store? I would start with 10 per week and end up selling 40 or 50 a week, I replied.
They obviously did not believe me, but they didn't challenge my statements. The meeting broke up at that point, and I was taken to a hotel to freshen up for some Texas hospitality later that evening. The next day was Saturday, and about 9:30 I received a phone call that Mr. Tandy was tied up and that I should have my breakfast. He would pick me up later. About 10:30, Charles picked me up at the hotel and took me to the yet uncompleted Tandy Center. He showed me the building and parking lot with its subway into the center. He told me that it would become a center of life in Fort Worth, and he wanted to be his contribution to the city he loved.
Then Charles told me how he had started in business making leather hobby kits and selling them in his craft stores, how he had bought the failing Radio Shack company, which was a retail electronics distributor that had evolved from ham radio equipment. He had built Radio Shack into the world's largest electronic retailer and one of the largest distributors in the United States. He believed that the personal computer industry was going to become very important in the near future. He also said that most of the companies then in business would fail within a year or two. The reason, he said, was because they were so disorganized and had no idea how to manufacture and market their products. I was very impressed with Charles's statements because I had staked my future on the industry, and I had the same feelings about some of the companies I did business with.
After we left the construction of Tandy Center, we went to the temporary offices of the corporation where we resumed our meeting. There I was told that Charles wanted to buy my store and hire me to train managers for his computer stores. The purchase price offered was not very liberal, but I was assured that my employment contract would be very good. I told them I would take it up with my partners. When I returned to New York, I consulted my wife, who actually owned the store, and her parents, who had supplied some of the starting capital. They said, "Do what you think's best."
My partner, Mike Alpert, said that as long as he got back his investment and some return, he would go along with anything I wanted to do. So the decision was mine alone to make. One thing bothered me about this sale, and I called to talk it over with Charles Tandy. When I started the store in 1976, I did not draw any salary for a full year. We lived on my wife's salary as a New York City school teacher. It had always been my intention to pay myself that fact salary when the store income allowed it. Now, if I sold out, that year would be down the drain. I explained this to Charles and told him that all I wanted was $25,000 for that hard year. He could not see it and told me that I was getting my foot on a high rung of the ladder at Radio Shack. He told me that all of the men who stuck with him when he took over Radio Shack were now millionaires. This attitude turned me off to the deal, and I decided to turn it down. The TRS-80 became the most popular computer ever built, but Charles Tandy passed away a year later. Most of the people he brought in to develop the Model I computer were gone shortly after his death. John Ratliff, Charles Tandy's assistant, told me that I would have never made it at Radio Shack.
"You are a maverick, and there's no place for mavericks in this company." He left a short time later. The TRS-80 Model I Level 1. The TRS-80 Model I Level 1 was released to the Radio Shack stores on August 3rd, 1977. It sold for $599.95 and was sold out for months. It took them almost 2 years to catch up with the demand for TRS-80 computers, particularly in the later versions of this evolving design. This represented millions in lost sales. The Model I Level 1 was a very elementary computer with 4K of RAM and no capability to connect to a printer. You could develop simple programs and save them on a cassette. If you were lucky, you could even reload them. Radio Shack did provide some pre-programmed software on cassettes. There was a payroll program for up to 8 employees, a menu adjusting program, a message center program, a home recipe, and a math program. These cost from $4.95 to $9.95. A game cassette came with the computer. The TRS-80 was mostly an educational machine at this point, but it gave promise of things to come. As simple as the Level 1 machine sounds today, it represented the first affordable computer that was ever available to most people. In addition, you could buy one, take it home, and use it immediately with the aid of the excellent basic manual that came with it.
The restriction of 4K was not as bad as it sounds today when we think of programs in terms of megabytes. The basic language and the boot up routines were in ROM and therefore took up no programming space from the usable memory complement. If you had an Altair, MSI, SOL, or SWTPC computer, you first had to load BASIC into memory. This could take up 8 to 12K of your precious 16K of RAM so that you didn't end up with more than 4K of programming space anyway. There's one large picture spanned across 2 pages with a gentleman buying a TRS-80 Model I system at a Radio Shack and another gentleman ringing him up. Or actually, we don't know what he's buying. The guy's ringing him up on a TRS-80 Model I, though. So anyway, the caption to the pictures say, Radio Shack's biggest advantage was the fact that they already had hundreds of stores in place throughout the United States and Canada.
The advent of the TRS-80 started a whole new group of computer enthusiasts. These new computer owners differed from the hardware hackers who had built their own 8080 or 6800 computers and learned to program in machine language or assembler. The TRS-80 people knew absolutely nothing about the inside of their computers, and Radio Shack was determined that they learned nothing. You voided the warranty if you even opened the case. The Radio Shack Computer Center was to do all the repairs and install all the upgrades. This left the TRS-80 owners with only one outlet for their computer interests, and that was the creation of software. With the introduction of Level 2 Basic, the library of available TRS-80 software outgrew any other type.
When the TRS-80 owners first appeared at the computer clubs, they were greeted with derision. They couldn't speak the language, they knew nothing about what made computers work, and they used strange software. The name Trash 80 was pinned upon their machines more from spite than from problems with the machines. Actually, the TRS-80 was built better than almost any computer on the market. There were very few problems with the computer.
The major problem Radio Shack had was with the cassette recorder they sold to be used with the TRS-80. This had problems loading and saving software and caused a lot of frustrations. Radio Shack soon came out with a new and more reliable recorder, and the problems ceased. The name Trash 80 remained, first as an annoyance, then later as a term of affection.
Level 2 Basic. The development of Level 2 Basic gave the TRS-80 its first real chance to make good on all the promises Radio Shack had been making to the public. This vastly improved language was able to be used for business and home applications. Most of the computers were Level 2, but those who had bought the original Level 1 machines could have their machines upgraded for $120. Video games started to appear using the graphics characters, and the stock of available cassettes in all categories increased.
By 1978, semiconductor technology had advanced to the point where 16K memory chips had come down in price, and it was possible to offer an upgrade to the TRS-80. This removed the original memory chips and replaced them with new 16K RAM. Many users had this upgrade done when they had a Level 2 Basic installed. It was quite expensive to have Radio Shack make the upgrade, and several small companies came out with do-it-yourself upgrade kits. These sold for about $140, about half the price of the Radio Shack installation, and many users bought the kits, opened their case for the first time, and installed their own RAM.
By 1976, Radio Shack was selling the Level 2 16K TRS-80 for $849. This included a numeric keypad, a 6K RAM, and the 12K ROM containing the Level 2 Basic. The enhanced Basic included such features as string handling, multi-dimensional arrays, and multi-letter variable names. Level 1 only had 2-letter variable names. You could name cassette files, and full editing was supported. Since BASIC came in a 12K ROM, the entire 16K was available for user programs. In 1979, this was a huge amount of available memory. The TRS-80 was equal to a 28K system, and it was hard to imagine that anyone would ever need more than that.
The expansion unit and disk drives. The tape cassette had been considered a great improvement over paper tape for storing programs and data for personal computers, but soon it became apparent that it was not a satisfactory solution as a data storage medium. The serial transfer rate was too slow, and the method of converting digital data into audio frequencies for recording was subject to error. The inexpensive tape cassettes designed for audio were prone to failure and tape stretch that rendered them unreadable.
The S100 computers were adopting floppy disk storage. 8-inch diskettes and the recently invented 5.25-inch mini floppies were coming into use. Apple Computer was selling their 5.25-inch disk drives for the Apple II as fast as they could make them.
For Radio Shack to develop a disk drive system, a major system unit had to be designed and manufactured. This was the expansion interface, a unit that could be mounted under the video display. It contained the RAM expansion, up to 32K could be installed. It also provided a real-time clock, serial interface, printer port, and most importantly, the disk controller. The controller could support up to 4 floppy disk drives. The TRS-80 mini disk system used a diskette with a capacity of 83K formatted. The disk with the operating system on it had 53K remaining. There were 35 tracks per disk with 2,500 bytes per track, divided into 10 sectors. Data could be moved in or out of the disk at a rate of 12.5 kilobytes per second, a great improvement over tape cassettes. The operating system, TRS-DOS, had to be on the first drive for the system to operate.
And there's a photo on this page, which looks like a teacher in a classroom with 2 students and one sitting at a TRS-80 Model I. It says, the TRS-80 was a versatile educational tool and teacher's aid. The low-cost machine came completely wired and tested. It was also lightweight and easily moved from classroom to classroom. Between the Apple II, also big in schools, and TRS-80s, a whole generation of students were introduced to the personal computer. TRS-DOS, the Radio Shack operating system. The dominant disk operating system for 8080 and Z80 CPUs was CP/M. It was used by almost all of the manufacturers of this type of computer, and therefore a considerable library of software had developed for CP/M systems. It was considered the standard for this type of computer.
Radio Shack chose to ignore the standard and develop their own operating system. It was far more important for them to completely control their system than make a considerable stock of programs available to Radio Shack owners. In fact, Radio Shack made it impossible to run the standard CP/M on a TRS-80 computer by preempting certain entry points on the memory map. Since these points were in the system ROM, it was impossible to change them.
As a result, TRS-DOS developed on its own. While it was possible to port many CP/M programs to TRS-DOS, it was a task for an expert and required a rework of the program. In time, TRS-DOS came to have as big a library of software as CP/M and as much support among software publishers. There were several versions of TRS-DOS, including some produced by third-party software developers, which were compatible but included features not found in Radio Shack's versions. Eventually, there were versions of CP/M that could be run on the TRS-80. These were not compatible with standard CP/M, and programs had to be specially configured to run on them.
The Radio Shack attitude. When Radio Shack first started with computers, They were completely uncooperative with third-party developers of peripherals and software for their computers. They were extremely protective of their name and copyrights. They even tried to prevent magazines from using the phrase TRS-80 and to prevent third-party peripheral manufacturers from even saying that their products were compatible. Some of the things they did were petty and annoying to users. While other manufacturers promoted their products and their name, Radio Shack threatened them with lawsuits. It took a long time, but eventually the old guard retired, and Radio Shack eventually changed its policies and opened up connections to other companies and the press.
The Model II TRS-80 computer. The Model I became the entry point for thousands of businesses to enter the computer age. They could take the first steps towards computerization with the support of Radio Shack and the large library or TRS-DOS software. The cost was very low and the training was readily available. In parts of the United States, outside the big cities, computer experts were very scarce, but soon there were TRS-DOS experts all over, mostly young people who had bought the first TRS-80s and become expert in programming them. The companies that adopted TRS-80 as a business tool soon demanded a more powerful computer, but they wanted to stay with the software they had.
Radio Shack's answer was the larger TRS-80 Model II, a system using the faster Z80A CPU, higher capacity 8-inch disk drives, greater memory capacity, and a larger, better video screen. The Model II evolved into the Model 12, Model 16, and eventually into the Model 6000, which used the Motorola 68000 CPU and ran under the Unix operating system. Many of these Tandy business systems were still in operation as late as the 1990s.
Whew! I just want to say we made it. So
We made it.
I'm saying this before we've edited this, but folks, we've had some technical issues, and this is what our third run on this one. So I think it'll be all right this time. But what do you think, Randy?
I hope so.
I'm not that familiar with the Model 6000. Are you? I have to look that one up.
Well,
The
I just
12,
came from the Tandy Assembly Show, and
yeah.
you can see every model of Tandy ever produced, and I have seen a 6000.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure there was one there this time.
Correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong, but the Model 1s are reasonably quite a lot of them still around these days. Model 3s and 4s
Yeah.
pretty common. Model 2s are pretty rare. 12s are even
Yep.
more rare. 16s even more rare. So I think 6000 is even more one of the rarest, probably. Right? Would you say?
I'd say that's probably fairly accurate. Yeah. Yeah. You can find Model 1 pretty easily, and 3s.
Mhm. Well,
4s are maybe
they
a little
sold a
bit
ton of
harder.
them.
They did.
Well, we're going to keep our little note section short, and but I know you have interviewed David and Teresa Welsh, and so talk about that a moment. And
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
perfect for this.
So I don't mean to use this as a platform to advertise the Floppy Days podcast, but over there I do have a lot
By all
of
means.
I have a lot of episodes about Tandy computers that have been done over time. I've covered the Model 1, the Coco, the Model 2. We haven't talked about Coco yet. The Model 2, 3, and some others that we haven't talked about yet. But David and Teresa Welsh wrote a book called Priming the Pump. It's a history of Tandy and their computer business. And I have a couple of interviews with them. I also acquired their entire computer inventory when they had to get rid of everything. I'm currently still even selling their book. I've got the last printed copies remaining of their book, new printed copies, that is, of their book, and that I'm selling right now. So if you have an interest, you can let me know via email or whatever. But yeah, it was fun talking with them. Unfortunately, Teresa recently passed away. David's still around, but fun folks. And then I also did get an interview on Floppy Days with Steve Leininger and Don French, which were not mentioned specifically in Stan's book, but they are the gentlemen who really designed and pushed Tandy to develop the Model I computer for their business. So it was great to get an interview with those gentlemen as well. And I got both of them to sign my Model I, or one of my Model Is.
Have you started selling any of those books yet? We had, of course,
Yes.
This is a redo of the episode, so we talked about this last time, but you've sold some now?
Yeah, so I recently went to the Tandy Assembly show, which is just about Tandy computers that I mentioned earlier. And I sold 11 copies just at that show. But
okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you have a price point now that it's for sale for?
Yeah, it's $28. $28 plus shipping.
Okay. All right. And of course, we'll put this in the show notes, and so people can find out about the book, and order one from you. And I don't think I have the book anymore, or it's in a box. I have a lot of stuff in storage, but I have the book. Yeah, I bought it from them years ago and read it. So excellent. But
it's a great book. And I've got like 40 copies left. That's it. 40 copies.
I'll tell a quick story to wrap it up. Is when I first started collecting computers, I decided to start doing that while I was still in the Army, and I was still based in Germany, and I knew I was about to come back to the States. And my uncle had a TRS-80 4P that he had used for many, many years. And so I knew that when I came back to where I am now, in my hometown, Jacksonville, Florida, he was down in like 50, 60 miles south of here, Crescent City, Florida. So anyway, that was one of the earliest computers I added to my collection back in the day. And it was great. It was in pristine condition. That was like 1993 when I came back. And so I picked that up, and then anyway, went on to El Paso, Texas, where I started the Historical Computer Society and all that good stuff. But I had that computer for a long time. And actually, you know what? Here's the last thing, is that he couldn't find any software for it. So he had no software. And I took it to El Paso, Texas. I was still in the Army, and I was stationed there. And there they had some stores a lot like CompuSay, called Computer City. Did you ever go to a Computer City, Randy?
No, I've never heard of Computer City. No.
So they were a lot like, CompuSay, right? Again, this is 1993. But guess who owned them?
I don't know.
Tandy, Radio Shack.
Oh.
So and so I found out I was able to go to their service department, and I could order the TRS-DOS boot disk for my Model 4P. And I think it was like $16. And then I went and picked it up like a week later on $5.25, and then I could boot so I thought that was kind of neat. I wish I still had that computer, but I don't remember. I ended up selling it, or it broke, and I gave it away to someone to fix it or something like that. But anywho,
the Model 1 was my very first computer, so I've definitely got a soft spot for that. I got one in '79, right when I graduated from college. So,
and you still have it, right?
Nope, I don't have the original one, but I've got 3 of them that I've acquired over the years. So.
Well, all right. So that's half of this chapter. It's a long chapter. So we have approximately, part 2, half of the rest of chapter 11. So we will see everybody again soon for that one. Right? Still a lot
of models to cover. So
yeah.
I'll talk to you later, David.
All right. Sorry.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Gotta hurry up and get this edited. Well, it's still fresh. Anyway, all right. See ya.